Welcome pilots, my name is Hybrid V and we have yet another patch on the horizon here. 3.20 has been in the PTU Wave 1 and 2 for about roughly over a week now. Possibly by the time you're watching this, it probably goes to a wider PTU, we shall see. And CIG have been hammering away at bug fixing and stability before they open the floodgates to even more backers to test out before it eventually goes out to live. In this patch, you see this brand new ship here I'm flying. The Hull C is a ship I've personally been waiting for quite a long time. This ship has been in concept and has not been in the game for many years. We've been waiting for a long time, and it is one of the larger hauling ships in the game. It is akin to like a small container ship. Larger super container ships, for example, would be more in the Hull D and Hull E area, but the Hull C is kind of in the middle. We have the Hull A, which is the smaller little puddle jumper, and then we have this guy, the Hull C, which carries quite a bit of cargo, and while it's extending its spindle here, you'll see I'm going to show the animation, it actually can't even land on a planet because of how big it is carrying all this cargo. Now, while it was in that compact mode, I can land on planets and hangars, but now that I'm fully extended here with those physics grids that hold the brand new cargo, it cannot actually land and it has to actually dock. And you can see this blue square off in the distance. This is actually my pickup point for my cargo that I'm getting right now. And these every major planet in the Stanton system has an orbital station, a low Earth orbit station as it's called, LEOs. And they all have cargo decks. And this is where you actually load and unload your cargo for your Hull C. Currently, only the Hull C uses this current mechanic right now. And this is the only way we can move stuff in between systems here. So I'm going to go ahead and move into this box so I can get the transfer system underway and get some cargo aboard my ship. Let's go ahead and maneuver. I'm going to have to slow down a little bit here because she is heavy.
I've got you into the loading area. Get you to take and start loading your cargo.
All right, let's maneuver in.
You are clear to launch.
Now, this is the PTU, you're going to hear a lot of really spammy ATC. It's just currently the way the game is right now. It's annoying. I'm going to go ahead and kill my engines here so we can start the process of transferring. Now, you don't need to kill your engines. I just want to make sure I'm not giving any input or anything like that and moving and interrupting the process.
Start cargo transfer now.
All right, the cargo transfer is started. You can see the progress bar here. I got about 5 minutes it's going to take to fully load up my ship here. I bought a full load of cargo and I'm going to go ahead and take it to another station once we are done loading here. And this is pretty much the most vulnerable part of this aspect here, is the loading and unloading sequence. Someone could come in here and conceivably just shoot at me while I'm here, and there's not much I can do about it. And that's kind of one of the interesting aspects. And I've seen a lot of people doing this now. They're kind of going around and just shooting at each other in the verse, especially for Hull Cs that are loading up. Now, it doesn't really amount to anything. There's not really much you can do. I mean, if you're a guy in a Gladius shooting at a Hull C, you're not really doing anything because remember, it's got 2 size 3 shields. But anyway, I digress. One thing I want to alert you folks to, you've probably seen it a little bit here. This is the PTU, and currently there's a lot of stuttering and a lot of weird micro stutters and frame drops. Apparently, according to a lot of other players, it probably is centered around the Hull C, it seems. So whenever players are spawning the Hull C currently in the PTU, it causes some performance issues. So you're probably going to see that throughout this entire video. I mean, in everything I recorded, there was tons of frame drops and really annoying issues. And there's not much I can do about it. It's not my system. It is simply the PTU. It's everybody experiencing that. And like I said, I think it has something to do with this ship, the Hull C. So I do apologize. You're going to see that in this video. There's not much I can do to correct that. I just apologize. There's not much I can do. But beyond that, yeah. So you'll see that these cargo boxes, if you're already familiar with Star Citizen's cargo system, we were always dealing with those small 1 SCU container boxes. Now, with our brand new system here with the Hull C, we have brand new container boxes. We have full-size container boxes that we now can load onto the Hull C. But the Hull C is not the only one that gets it. Every other ship in the game that can trade cargo also is going to benefit from these brand new cargo containers. And there's a whole slew of them. And it's quite amazing the differences that you have here. You have huge giant squares. You have like these longer ones here. Now, off the top of my head, I don't remember what these are. I think these longer ones are 32 SCU. I think that's how much they are. I'm not entirely certain. I don't remember off the top of my head. I know there's like 1 SCU, 2 SCU, and then it goes up to like 16s and 32s. There's a whole different array of crates that are available for trading. And the game will, based on the ship that you have, will smartly pick the right crates that will work for your ship. So if your ship can hold the biggest crates, it will try to put as many as it can in there. And if it cannot, like it can only hold smaller ones, maybe it'll put the smaller 2 SCU crates in there, or it'll just give you the 1 SCU crates, whichever works best. It intelligently kind of looks at what's in your hold and automatically adjusts what it puts in there accordingly. And yeah, the other thing they did is the existing utility item, our tractor beams, can actually move these crates. It's completely temporary right now. Eventually, we are going to get a tractor rifle, and we will be able to move stuff around with that as well. As well as the Hull C is supposed to come with tractor beam turrets, because in the future, this current mechanic right here that I'm doing right now is just a placeholder mechanic. This is not the finalized version of cargo trading for large ships. In the future, you will have to do this yourself with the tractor beams aboard the ship. The tractor turrets are not currently on the ship, and that is because we're still waiting for that technology to come in, which is probably going to come in when the SRV comes in. At least that's how I would expect it. And until that's a thing, we just have this kind of placeholder mechanic. In the future, you will have to manually load it with those tractor beams yourself, or you could hire NPCs to do it for you, or you just get you and your buddies together and do it. And of course, you could try doing it yourself as well, but it probably will take a very long time, but it will save you a lot of money. So yeah, this mechanic, being that it's just a placeholder, I actually quite enjoy that. I, for one, am not one of those people that likes having necessarily the full polished mechanic in the game all at once. I'd rather get it in a placeholder format because I want to actually play new gameplay elements and new mechanics. I don't want to have to wait 2 or 3 years for this system to come in because they want to get it into all the parts and elements in. For example, like I said, the tractor beam turret, if we had to wait for the SRV and the tractor beam turret to come in, we would have to wait for this gameplay segment I'm playing here until those come in, and that could be another year from now. Why would we want to wait? Just put it in now. So I approve of this. Some of you may not, but I personally think it's great. Anyway, let's move on.
All cargo's been transferred.
Please proceed to site landing bay.
Flying.
All right, we're good to go. Let's get underway. Now, I'm not going to do a full interior breakdown of the ship right now. I'm going to save that actually for the end of this video. If you want to jump to that part or any other part of this video, there are timestamps below for you to check out if you want to jump to a part that interests you.
Over control of your vehicle.
Yeah, sorry, the ATC is incredibly spammy in this build right now. Also, they get very angry with you once they finish loading the cargo, because if you don't move right away, they will store you, so you have to immediately get out of the area once cargo has been finished put on your ship, otherwise you will get stored. So you can hear them nagging you the entire time, despite the fact that I just had that cargo finished. But anyway, let's go ahead and plot a destination. Probably not Hurston. I think I'm going to go to ArcCorp to Bajini Point. Let's see, set route, and you can see 738 seconds. That's about, give or take, about 12 minutes or so. And then you can look at Microtech, 993 seconds. That's like around 16 minutes, I think. So you can see this thing is very slow, very heavy, very, very slow. You can see another Hull C there, probably going to load up some cargo as well, or maybe unload cargo. It's all the same system currently. And the way it works is you buy cargo from the terminal while the ship is either docked or stored, and then you fly out and you do exactly what I just did there. You go straight to the cargo deck, you load up the ship, and then you go to your next destination, you land, you can store the ship, and then you go back to the admin deck or the admin terminal at the Galleria for that station. And then you sell the cargo, then you have to spawn the ship again, or at least undock it, take it back to the cargo deck, and spend another 5 minutes unloading. It's a little convoluted. It is very convoluted, actually, and a lot of people generally in their feedback do not like this system, and it makes sense why they wouldn't like it, but CAG have said in the future that this will be done through the Moby Glass rather than having to get out of your ship. So that is a nice thing that they are going to change.
Landing complete. Have a pleasant stay.
As I continue to get spammed by the ATC. Anyway, let's punch it.
Initiating
All right,
ship
away we go.
storage.
I'm actually glad that this travel time actually takes quite a while because there is so much coming into this patch. Beyond the Hull C and the changes to cargo and whatnot and Seraphim Station, there is a lot that is coming in that was both documented and not documented. First and foremost, I want to talk about the changes to the combat ship pools that NPCs get now. Before, we had mostly like Gladiuses, M50s, maybe you get a Valkyrie, occasional Retaliator, but it really wasn't a very diverse pool of ships you can fight from. Now, we actually have a much more wider variety of enemy ships we're going to be able to fight, and according to CAG, this is actually pulled from PvP data. So in the lower, much easier categories of fighting for the bounty hunter pools, for example, say low risk targets or very low risk targets, you will see, for example, much more like industrial ships, civilian ships, or even just entry-level fighters and whatnot in those categories. And then as you go higher up into the difficulty pools, you will start to see far more combat-focused oriented ships. And again, like I said, CIG has claimed that this is actually from the pool of PvP data. So my guess is that the ships with a higher body count in PvP are going to be in the much higher pools of actual bounties. So for example, in the very low risk and low risk targets, you'll see a lot of mining ships, you'll see vultures. At one point, I even fought a raft, which was actually really fun to see in the game. Raft is one of my favorite ships. Not a combat vessel per se, but still it was fun to actually fight it because it's one thing to fly it yourself and it's another thing to actually shoot at it. So that was genuinely a pleasant surprise to actually see in the lower difficulty bracket range for the bounty hunting. And you're probably noticing from a lot of the combat footage that I'm imposing over my current recording right now, you're noticing that I'm flying a lot of the Ares Inferno and the Ares Ion, and that is because the Ares Inferno and Ion have had their fixed assist added back into the game, so now they actually can shoot at targets. Now, quick reminder what fixed assist if you don't already know. Every ship in the game has some form of very light auto aim, even if you're using fixed weapons or just have your gimbals fixed. And this is just simply because of the nature of combat in Star Citizen, how things move, a lot of networking, and just a whole slew of different things that are going on in the background. So fixed assist just nudges the barrel so that way the weapons are, if you're close to the pip at least and you're aiming and you're servicing the aim, the weapons will automatically kind of track and try to shoot in the general direction of that pip and try to get it on target. The Inferno and Ion had theirs taken away, which meant it was darn near impossible to hit anything with it because those ships are heavy fighters. They're already very, very slow. Their rotation and their ability to pitch and yaw, all that is all very slow. So getting rounds on target was always very difficult. Now with added fixed assist, now you can actually hit stuff with it. You can actually do what the ship was designed for, which is combat. Now, it's not going to win really any dogfights in PvP, but as a support vessel against heavier ships, it is a blast to fly, which is exactly how they were designed for. It was really annoying that CAG took that away, but I'm glad to see that it finally returned. And you can expect both ships to be the top dogs in grinding out those bounties when you're trying to get to your ERTs, as they are both excellent platforms, especially the Ion, which does not require ammo.
Target destroyed.
Alright, next up on the chopping block in my notes, and yes, I need notes because there is a lot to talk about in this update, and a lot of it's not even documented. But first and foremost, I do want to talk about Arena Commander, which is also another big ticket item coming into this patch. And the front end has been improved vastly. We went away from that crappy flash system that we had prior, and now we are on a little bit more of a building block system, so things are far more user-friendly. All the typical modes that you can expect are there, but now we also have some new inclusions, including things like Gun Rush, Tank Royale, and Master Mode's limited test, as well as some improvements for Star Marine. So for example, loading equipment in Star Marine is a breeze now. No longer do you have to put individual ammo and med pen slots and whatnot. The game will automatically give you the correct amount of ammo and med slots that you'll need when you actually get into a match. UI elements within matches have been vastly improved, though they can be a little bit buggy at times still, so there's still polish that needs to be worked out there. Ship customization is still the same. In my testing, it was buggy. Like, I would try to adjust the loadout, say on a Freelancer, to do some Vandal Swarm, and I would just lose the main guns, and I could not edit the guns, period. It was just broken at that point. I just could not fix the ship weapons, period. So there's still a lot of bugs and glitches they need to iron out. But beyond those changes, there's also brand new maps. Now, first and foremost, we already have Broken Moon and Dying Star. Those are the old ones. They are relatively unchanged as far as I can tell. We already understand and know those and love those. The new ones we're getting is, for example, INS Jericho, and if you're well aware, INS Jericho is actually within the PU currently in the Stanton system, and it is the spot where Xenothreat generally centralizes around near Mike L1 station. And it is a complete recreation of that area. There's nothing really much added there except in Free Fly, where you get maybe some additional floating platforms that you can hang out at, and of course there's no defensive turrets there. And while there's not really much to write home about there, that is actually a thing the PvP community has been asking for a while, because the existing maps, Broken Moon and Dying Star, both run at generally, give or take, depending on the hardware in your system, could be running at around 30 FPS. And of course, anybody who knows who does any PvP, 30 FPS is really not the greatest. That's CIG's metric. That's where they try to aim at to get almost all machines to at least target and get at or above 30 FPS. But when it comes to actually dogfighting other players in really high stakes battles, a lot of players just don't want to deal with 30 FPS. They want to get maximum FPS because people deal with motion sickness and a whole slew of other issues that come with it. So having these little bit more barren but still beautiful maps are a huge positive, a huge win for not just the PvP community, but for anybody who just wants to get in and just quickly test stuff without having to wait for longer load times and whatnot. And one of the other cool things that is going on with this new free fly update for the free fly mode, I should say, is that now you can actually bring your Star Marine kit with you into free fly. So as you adjust your character for any Star Marine game mode, I think it's elimination is I think the default one it will take with you. You'll actually be able to bring all that weapon and equipment with you into free fly. So not only can you practice flying around freely, or even in a multiplayer free fly, be able to maybe dogfight some people on there just for fun, you also can get out of your ship and shoot at each other. You'll have full equipment, you'll have all the ammo you need and the med pens you need, and you can go around and walk around in those maps, just as if they were in the PU. If you were in the PU yourself, going to that area, you can walk around, you can shoot, you can throw grenades, you have everything at your disposal. So not only is the free fly mode available to players who also want to just free fly and test their ships, it's also a great place for you to test out Star Citizen's weapons, whether they're the existing ones currently in the game, or ones you have, for example, as subscriber items, or ones you can rent, or of course it's also going to be an excellent test bed for testing out new weapons when they come down the line. And one of the cool things about Jericho is it has that long range platform in between, because it's basically a shipyard for a destroyer in the game if you ever played on the Xenothreat event. One of the cool things that I will at least foresee our org doing is maybe doing like some sniper fun battles where we do kind of like a facing worlds type of duel with sniper rifles across each individual arm, maybe give everybody a sniper rifle and just run in and just have fun blasting each other across the arms. I think that would be really, really fun. But beyond INS Jericho, we also now have Security Post Korea, which is also an existing system or existing location within the Stanton system that's just outside of Salon in the Crusader area. And that area is now available for Free Fly, Vandal Swarm, Pirate Swarm as well, just as INS Jericho is as well. And just like INS Jericho, you can also land and you can get out of your ship and you can freely fight inside the actual station itself if you so desire. So it is not only a map in Free Fly, it's not only a map for just testing out ships, you can also test out weapons there as well and have fun shooting your friends in the face there if you so choose to. It's a great map, and also it runs very, very well, and it's just as beautiful as the one in the PU itself as well. Then we also have Winner's Circle, which is actually the racing map that has been updated. So if you're used to the old racing map, it was a location, I forgot the name of the planet that it's supposed to be on. It's supposed to be some kind of planet in a distant system, and it is a popular destination for racers, and they have completely redid that map. So now it is an existing actual planet with actual atmosphere, because the old map was actually 0G despite it's supposed to be an atmosphere. So this one now actually has actual gravity and has actual atmospherics, so you can fly, and it's going to be an excellent test bed to test out things like, for example, aerodynamic control surfaces when those come in and whatnot. Because not only can you do racing on this map, you also can now do free fly as well. And because it is a fully generated planet, you not only can fly around and do whatever you can expect from a free fly, you also can now land at the location below and traverse the forest. Now, the details in the forest are not like the greatest, and that's because it's mostly a map designed for dogfighting. Hey, Hybrid from the editing bay here. Just wanted to let you know that a recent PTU update actually improved the visuals of Winner's Circle, so it's more on par with what we're used to already in the PU, rather than the barren kind of map we had prior in some of my older recordings. Regardless, it's really nice to see them continue to do additional polish passes and updates day to day as we slowly work our way towards a live release of this 3.20 PTU. Anyway, let's get back to the video. But you still can get into the forest, get lost in there, and shoot your friends there if you so desire. So once again, it just gives you a lot more opportunity to do some real fun stuff with this map. But not only can you just test flying and shooting, you also can mine on this map, because again, it is a procedurally generated planet, and it has all the elements that you would expect from that planet, which also includes mineable nodes. So if you are, for example, interested in trying out mining, but you can't afford it in-game, or you don't want to fork over real cash, you can instead use your REC to rent a mining ship and then take it into the actual location down below and start finding some rocks and trying it out for yourself. Now, currently mining ships and salvage ships, you can't modify them with anything in Arena Commander. You can't give it a new mining head or add gadgets or anything like that, so you can't get too in-depth with it, but it is still a very good entry-level way of kind of practicing mining and getting a feel for it, especially if you're brand new to it or you're trying to train, say, org members into it. That is also a thing you definitely can do as well, and it's a really, really welcome addition, because I know a lot of miners were kind of upset that Arena Commander got a bunch of really cool stuff for us to test, but nothing really for mining. But again, this is one of those undocumented features that were added into the game, where mining was added as a thing, even though it was kind of a knock-on effect. I don't really think it was intended for them to add mineable nodes. It just happens when they do terrain generation of planets. These things automatically are added into the game, and it probably was an oversight, possibly, and who cares? I mean, it's in there and it works, and I don't see why CAG would ever even want to take it out unless it causes some real issues. I think it's actually a really fun idea to actually have mineable nodes in Arena Commander just to practice and have fun. You can't mine anything with it, you can't make any money, but again, Arena Commander is more about practicing things, and I think that it is a really, really cool kind of knock-on effect we got with that as well, so love to see it. On top of the aforementioned new modes and maps that come with it, we also had a huge update to racing, so racing fans, you are going to be eating well this patch. We have, for example, the updated maps that are now using the new Winner's Circle map, but we also have racing locations that are currently in the PU, such as like Icebreaker, Yadar Valley, and Miner's Lament, added into Arena Commander now, so you can actually practice it there rather than going out into the PU, because we all know one of the issues of doing racing out in the PU is the problem of if you die, you then have to respawn at a medical facility, then you have to claim your ship, then you have to get your ship and you have to travel back out to the racing location to try again. And the downtime is just really annoying because it makes practicing very difficult, and it's very time consuming. So now they actually have those maps, or at least most of the maps that are in the PU right now. There is a few that are missing, but most of the maps are now available as a location that you can select in Arena Commander to practice your times with before you actually take it out into the persistent universe. So if you're one of those people that likes racing, but you do struggle with the time sink that's involved for some of those locations because of the death mechanics currently in the game, then you will probably absolutely enjoy this, because you can take this and play offline, and of course you can race against other people or just try to get the best time. And it is an absolute blast. My dad loves Star Citizen, but he's not very good at combat. He much prefers racing. That's his pastime with this game. He absolutely loves racing. So I let him get a shot at the racing in the game with, like, for example, the updated version of Old Vanderval and whatnot, and he loves it. He absolutely loves the redesign. The maps have been more attuned for atmospheric flights because, of course, you know, there's now atmosphere on those racetracks now compared to the old one, and they have been redesigned accordingly, and he just absolutely is having a blast with it. So it's fun to see him enjoying that as well. I'm not personally a racer too much, but trying the maps, I personally had a lot of fun with it. So it's been really, really good, and I'm really happy to see them put this into the game. Currently, we again have these updated race maps for Winner's Circle, but we have, like I mentioned before, Icebreaker, we have Yadar Valley, we have Miner's Lament, and the Snake Pit. We're still, like I said, missing some maps from the PU, but I'm sure those will come at a later time. The ones that we're missing is the one at Area 18 and the one at Loreville. I don't remember what they were called off at the top of my head, but I imagine those weren't put in because simply the load times will probably be quite a bit, and they're going to need to find ways to optimize that before they put that in Arena Commander. That's just a guess. Seems logical, but we shall see in the near future. But we also have the brand new game modes coming into Arena Commander, and the first one I want to talk about is Gun Rush. Now, Gun Rush is an absolute blast to play. The way it works is you're given a set armor and weapon, and then the first player that you kill, you will automatically get a brand new weapon along with the ammo for that. And every time you kill a player, you will continue to get a brand new weapon, and the better you're doing, the less armor they will actually give you, and the worse you're doing, the heavier armor they will give you. It's a very interesting concept. It's a take on something we've seen in other games before as well, but it's quite interesting seeing it in Star Citizen settings because it's an absolute blast. Now, it is not 100% perfect. One of the biggest issues I ran into the Gun rush mode was the actual lag and desync, which was absolutely horrendous and just led to some very, very awkward moments where I was killed by something invisible or I killed a player who was standing still, and it just wasn't fun. So the mode itself is fun, but the network issues were the biggest downer of this, and I do hope that they can address that before this goes live, because that is one of the biggest killers of this mode. The other mode is Tank Royale, both a team and a solo play version where you are given a Nova tank and you can just go around the battle and just freely blow up other people who are also given a Nova tank. It is really, really fun, but it does show, unfortunately, the shortcomings of Star Citizen's vehicles. First and foremost, the Nova's handling is atrocious, and CIG has already confirmed that that is a bug, so I do hope they get that fixed. But on top of that, the UI elements are absolutely just busted in this mode. It is somewhat serviceable, but hopefully you can see from the footage I'm imposing over my recording right now that you can see the UI is just a complete mess. The pips and the actual targeting interface is completely busted. Initially when you spawn, you don't have the gyro enabled. You have to remember to enable it, but the keybinds are a different key. It's the G key instead of X, which we're used to currently for turrets. So you have to enable it that way. And then there's also apparently a zoom function, which I wasn't even aware of. Apparently it's Z on your keyboard to enable zoom, which would have been nice to know. But of course, it's not documented anywhere. It's not mentioned anywhere. It was literally just a random forum post I had to look up to find that. And that was kind of interesting. Definitely a little bit more undercooked, but it is fun nonetheless. It's not as a little bit more polished as, say, Gun Rush is, but in terms of the fun that you can have with it, it is quite interesting. It is pretty darn fun to get into these long-range sniper battles with these tanks and actually just kind of feel the power of ground combat as it currently stands. Like I said, it's not perfect by any means. It's actually very, very janky. That's the best way I can describe current ground vehicle combat, is just janky. And they definitely have a lot of work they're going to need to do on this front. And I do hope they try to add more to this battle mode. I don't want to see just Novas. I would also love to see maybe Ursas or Centurions or something, maybe a mixture of all those also being thrown into those game modes. That would be actually a lot of fun to see, and it would also give players an opportunity to test these vehicles in an environment and give CIG a lot of data on this stuff. But overall, I think it's pretty good. Now, unfortunately, you can't actually do any kind of team battle in a way of, like, for example, having a friend gun for you while you drive. Not currently yet. In fact, all modes currently do not have anything like that right now. So if you want to do like a Team Vandal Swarm and you want a gun for your buddy's Warden or whatever, you can't currently do that yet. CIG have confirmed that that's coming later though, just not right now. So when that will be a thing, that will make things a lot more fun in these modes, because you'll be able to hang out with your friends and have them do gunning or driving for you, and you can work as a team in that respect rather than it just being a solo effort. This also looks like it would be an excellent test bed for the Storm, which is supposed to be coming out very soon too. So this will be, seems like they're going to probably use this mode to maybe potentially test the Storm. Maybe, maybe not, we'll see. Allegedly, according to CIG, this stuff is very, very simple and easy to put together. I mean, you'll even notice from some of the footage I recorded of that the Tank Royale mode, they actually use the map Good Doctor for the actual fights that you can take part in. It's just the exterior, because remember, Good Doctor itself is just one big map. It's an actual procedurally generated planet, and all they're really doing is just putting you outside the Good Doctor map. And yeah, that's where the fights now actually happen, is in the location around Good Doctor. And hey, it works. It's perfectly fine. It's perfectly serviceable. The only issue, of course, like I said, is the Nova's handling is pretty atrocious, and that, of course, is just chalked up to a bug. But I really, really am interested in looking forward to seeing them kind of flesh this mode out more. I'm a big fan of Combined Arms gameplay. And of course, we haven't heard anything about Theaters of War. Last people have checked in with it, Theaters of War is just kind of on hiatus because it is not a priority. And this is the closest we can kind of get to Theaters of War or any type of Combined Arms gameplay, though there is no Combined Arms actual gameplay. It is just vehicles. And I do hope that they kind of open this up a little bit more. It would be really fun to have, for example, infantry fighting in the center of Good Doctor and then having these tanks actually fighting out in the battlefield as well. I think that'd be kind of interesting, right? Like two teams, and you have players who are in the tanks fighting in the exterior, and you have players who are inside trying to fight for control of the actual map itself. And you just have these two big battles going on. Maybe throw some ships in there, right? Oh, sounds like Theaters of War to me. CIG makes Theaters of War already. Put it out already. Come on. Come on, CIG. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing more of this stuff get fleshed out patch over patch, because this stuff is really, really fun. The main issue, of course, though, one of the biggest issues with some of these modes, and just in Arena Commander altogether, is that we don't have private matches. That's not in this patch yet. That has been confirmed to be coming around in a much later patch, which is really, really unfortunate. That's one of the biggest things I'm looking forward to is private matches for Arena Commander, because one of the things me and my org love to do is we love to do a lot of regular practicing with different platforms and weapons. But the problem is the staging time in the actual live universe can take some time, and it's a lot easier to teach concepts, especially to newer members of our organization, in a much more controlled environment rather than having to go out into the PU and try to organize all this kind of stuff out there. It's just a huge time sink, and having private matches is really fun. It's a great way for us to get new players onboarded, as well as us doing like some training exercises and whatnot, or even just teaching brand new players aspects of the game. That's what we're looking for, but unfortunately for right now, that is not going to be a thing in this patch. That is slated for a much later patch. Another mode I wanted to talk about is Pirate Swarm, which is a mode we all know and love, but it has now been updated. Now the final fight features an actual Idris along with 2 hammerheads defending it, but they also do give you a javelin to assist you in that fight. Hilariously enough, that Idris is also called the Bug Smasher. I really enjoyed that. It kind of feels like a throwback to the old Bug Smashers we used to get on YouTube from Star Citizen's channel, of course. But not only that, the Arena Commander mode is also a mode used quite widely for identifying and fixing bugs, of course. So it is pretty fun to see that that is the name of that Idris you get to fight. Now, what's interesting is you only really need to destroy the escorts in this mode. You don't actually need to destroy the Idris. So all you need to do is just take out all the fighter supports and the hammerheads and whatnot, and once they're down, you will automatically win the match at the end. And this is okay. I would prefer that the Idris does have to actually go down, but it is how they have it balanced currently, probably because they expect maybe some players who get to this point maybe just don't have the firepower to actually deal with that Idris when it first comes in, or it just takes an extraordinary long time, because I've never seen the Idris actually go down in all the times I've been testing it, even when I use ships that are designed for fighting that Idris, such as an Ion or an Inferno, and every single time it is always the escorts that go down before the Idris does, and when it does, then the match ends and you don't get to see the fancy explosion of the Idris going up. Maybe as a kind of stylistic choice, maybe they can make it so when the escorts go down, the Idris just magically just blows up too, just so that way players can see that really cool explosion animation as like a send-off for winning the match, because it is a reward for winning, right? Overall, the mode is relatively straightforward. One of the cool things, though, with Pirate Swarm is it has the new maps, of course, so you can use INS Jericho, SPK, and of course Winner's Circle, so you can actually practice your dogfighting against AI in atmospheric combat, kind of see the differences there, rather than it just being in 0G like we're always used to. And yeah, overall, just the waves itself have been relatively the same. Not too much changing there. There's some minor bug fixes here and there, but the issue I've currently had is sometimes the modes just don't finish. And what I mean by that is you'll go into separate waves and the waves will just never stop. You'll just have no opponents in the area, and it's just very buggy, and you're just gonna have to exit that mode and come back. I think it has to do with the distances or the sizes of the maps and the AI either being out of bounds, which I've seen before as well, and the AI just being stuck off in the middle of nowhere, and none of the AI, they can't make their way to you. They don't know where you're at, and you don't know where they're at. So you just end up having these really annoying stalemates. I think what they could probably also do as a stopgap for that is put markers on top of ships for a wave if that wave hasn't been cleared after a certain period of time. That's the only real major issue I've noticed that's really broken a lot of my modes trying to play it. The other one I have noticed is that the capital ships are a little bit buggy. In some modes I've had, like for example, the Javelin that supports you just sitting still and just shooting into space and not really contributing to the fight at all. And then, of course, in Winner's Circle, the AI is not exactly the most adept at flying in atmospheric combat with a capital ship. So they end up actually rolling, and if you're well aware of how ships fly in Star Citizen, bottom thrusters are much more powerful. So the AI will tend to roll, and then they would end up crashing into the ground, because once you're on those top thrusters, you will just fall to your doom. And so you end up seeing a footage of like javelins like stuck in the ground or upside down. And I've even seen the Idris stuck upside down because it tries to roll and then it just falls flat on its face. So there's just AI glitches they need to work out there. This mode itself also highlights some really annoying issues with the current combat in Star Citizen right now. And this is affecting both the PU and in Arena Commander. And that is the annoying issue of having weapons penetrate through the hull. And I'm talking about laser weapons. Normally you're supposed to expect ballistic weapons to penetrate through your shields. And currently right now, laser weapons also can sometimes bleed and chip through your shields, which is really annoying because you'll look perfectly fine and then all of a sudden you'll just die instantly because you just got chipped through your shield. And that is a really, really annoying issue. It's super, super annoying. They haven't fixed this in a while since this PTO has gone up to a wider PTO, and I'm really hoping they address that before it goes live, because that is definitely not fun gameplay when you essentially have shields that are supposed to block laser damage, and yet you're constantly just getting chipped through the shields and getting blasted. It's just not fun. I don't know if that's actually a balance change, if that's actually intentional, or if that's a bug. It seems like a bug because it just doesn't lend itself well to any type of meaningful gameplay. You'll see a lot of that as you're playing into this PTO update. You'll see that there's going to be a lot of bleed through with shields currently, and it's just not fun. And yeah, I hope they do address that. But overall, when it comes to the Pirate Swarm mode, though, I think the adjustments at the end are a lot of fun. It can be quite overwhelming if you're in like a light fighter. The amount of actual firepower coming your way can be quite overwhelming, and it really will tax you. If you're in, for example, a very light fighter or even an entry-level fighter, it's going to tax you pretty darn hard. And if you're already not a combat proficient expert, you're probably not going to survive quite a long way. So I recommend, if you do have a ship that is not really that great at combat, either you just go in and just have fun and try to get as far as you can get, or just load up in multiplayer and play with some other people, so that way you can kind of have some support while you do it, because it is pretty fun playing with other players. I personally always like doing this mode solo, just because it's a great way for me to kind of test my controls and also test out different ships that come into the game. But sometimes playing with other players is also a valid thing that you can try out yourself as well. But overall, very, very good mode. I do quite enjoy it, and I would love to see them do a lot more with this going forward. They've talked about doing way more with Arena Commander later down the line. Like, I would love to see a capture the Idris mission as a thing you could do in Arena Commander. They've said that they are looking into it. That is a thing they definitely want to do, but it's currently not on the books. Soon TM is all we got so far. So we'll see how that goes. And last but not least, the biggest one that's coming in this Arena Commander update for 3.20 is, of course, Master Modes, which is a huge combat overhaul for the game coming down the road. And of course, this is just a limited test. They want players to kind of jump in early days and give it a shot and give their feedback. You're only given a Gladius that you can either test out in PvP, Free Fly, or Vandal Swarm, this new kind of Vandal Swarm mode that's kind of been built for Master Modes, which is just this endless wave of Vandal that just come and attack you. It's really, really fun. It's really cool. And it gives you an opportunity to really feel combat. It also kind of maybe is a little bit of a sneak peek of how you could expect combat in Squadron 42 to play out, right? Against the Vandal, as there's just these endless waves of fighters that you just got to constantly destroy. It's really cool. But beyond that, the actual changes for the Master Modes is quite interesting. It's very, very extensive, and I don't really want to spend too much time here because I could make an entire separate video talking about Master Modes. But the gist of it is that combat is being slowed down further, and there's a lot more consequence for your actions and how you engage in combat. For example, in our current combat system now, we can unlock our limiters and just go at Mach Stupid in any direction we want, which makes high-speed combat a thing currently in the game now. It's one of the things I hate about the current flight model of the game for combat, is that high-speed combat is a thing you have to actually get good at and practice, and the high-speed combat is just boring and lame in my opinion. I absolutely detest high-speed combat. I know a lot of players who do a lot of PvP really love it because they love the idea of delta merging with their opponent who's traveling at 1200 meters a second, and then getting on them within that 400 meters distance, and then tricording and slowing themselves down and all this. Your eyes are probably glazing over right now. I know, exactly. And that's the reason why I hate the combat system. It's not that I don't understand it, it's just not fun. To me personally, it's just not fun. And these changes are meant to make combat far more accessible and far more interesting in keeping those the combat speeds much, much lower, and I fully approve of that, because Accessibility, I know, is like a dirty word in a lot of gaming community, especially for PvPers, but accessibility just means not necessarily that it's making things easier for your average gamer. It just means that everybody can fundamentally understand what's going on. It's easy to understand, but difficult to master, where our current combat system is not easy to understand. I'm sorry, guys. You PvPers out there think that it's easy to understand. It is not easy to understand, okay? Trying to explain tricording, and this is to someone who does, on a regular basis, train a lot of newer players playing the game. Trying to explain something like tricording to a new player, their eyes immediately just glaze over, all right? Because it is a difficult concept to understand when you're dealing with 6 degrees of freedom of combat. So they're trying to kind of limit the axis that you can move in, it kind of flows along with other space sims that you see out there, like kind of like almost like Star Wars Squadron, but Star Wars Squadron is far more simplistic in its design, though it is a very fun flight model and it's very effective. So, you know, what they're trying to do is trying to do a system here where it is kind of similar to that, but it's still keeping some of those sim aspects that we already expect, while keeping things still engageable and still fun and enjoyable, because they could do hardcore sim, right? And then we'd just be zipping around as drones at doing 40 Gs, you know, pulls back and forth. Anyway, I'm talking a lot about this. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I will say I absolutely enjoy it, but if you guys have access to the PTU when it comes out, jump in and give your 2 cents. Try it out yourself. Try learning the new keybinds, because there's some new keybinds that are coming with this stuff. For example, you can switch between SCM and nav mode with the quantum key, so you can switch between modes on the fly, and SCM is your combat speeds, where you're really nice and slow, and then nav mode is literally just engaging your quantum drive, and you're just traveling kind of like how we're used to. We're traveling at very, very, very high speeds. You just cannot use your weapons. Your shields are offline. You can't use countermeasures, but it also takes time to spool up, and when you're spooled up, you can then really get up and go. It's the kind of your travel speed. And this was kind of a thing, this was kind of my critique of the old combat system a long time ago, or I should say the current combat system. Some time ago, I made a critique of this, that like, it'd be really nice if they actually had like a mode where you can switch between going faster and being slower, because one of the issues we had, of course, high speed combat. And we, a long time ago, used to have a system like that where you could go into kind of a cruise mode, where you would hit a button and then you would have like a countdown. It was like a 5-second countdown, and then you would go into cruise. And it would take a while before it would actually spool up, and then you would actually start to go really, really fast. We got rid of that for the current model that we have now, and it looks like we're coming back to that system to some degree, with some changes, of course. And yeah, I fully approve of this system. Of course, we need a lot more feedback. We need more player feedback. And I would personally love to see a lot more ships given to us to kind of test the differences, because right now it's only just either Vandal Swarm or mirror matches against other players, and that's pretty much it. That's all we have as an ability to kind of test this early. I would love to see this be tested, for example, like Gladiuses versus Arrows, Gladiuses versus a Hurricane, but that's not coming in yet. We are still only just testing it with the Gladius. Next up, we have the changes to mining, and all it really is a huge bug fix for instability. If you're a miner, you probably remember of how annoying it is when you're in a prospector and you see a rock that you clearly have the power to break, and yet you somehow just can't apply any power to that rock no matter what you tried. And the reason why is because there was a bug with instability. Instability, previously what it would do is it would basically just make how much energy you could put into that rock very, very erratic. That rock itself had its own resistance properties that were in the form of instability. That has been changed. Now instability affects your transfer rate of power to the rock. And loosely what that translates into is it means that instability is far more predictable now. It's far more easier to understand what is causing instability and what is not causing instability. And overall, if more or less, if you see a rock that says like hard, challenging, sometimes even those impossible rocks, you still can kind of get into them and you can crack them. And that was one of the annoyances when you're flying, for example, a prospector. You'd see a rock that would say easy or medium on it, and then you would try to apply power or gadgets or whatever, and you just couldn't crack it because the old stability system was just broken and you just couldn't apply power to it, no matter how hard you try. Now, because things are far more predictable, it's a lot easier to jump in and start affecting things. Now, I didn't really get to try out mining super in depth, and the reason why is because there was at the time a bug with your loadout manager where you just could not load any custom equipment onto your ships or anything like that. It would just break your inventory. It would just break all your ships and stuff like that. So I didn't get a chance to try it all. I just tried it with a stock mole and a stock prospector. And overall, it definitely felt a lot better. And if you're a miner and you got your chance to try it out yourself, let me know in the comments what you guys thought. Personally, it felt really good to me. I mean, just in the stock ship alone, I felt like I could actually mine stuff. And the instability that we talked about is also, because again, it affects your transfer rate up to rocks, but also the materials in that rock will also kind of affect some of those properties as well. So some of the more exotic materials, you can expect that the transfer rate will still be affected by that instability, but even a rock that says it's impossible can still potentially be broken. It just means that the instability of the laser output that you're putting out is having trouble being within an acceptable range, if that makes sense. So the instability may apply a huge amount of power and then it will back off and you'll get a low amount of power. And then you get a huge amount of power, but it's not erratic like it used to be. It's kind of in these ebbs and flows. At least that's what I've seen. And as long as you kind of can understand that oscillation, that inherent oscillation with that instability, you can kind of time things and kind of get things down into a pattern. Or you may just end up having to risk getting a little bit of that red in your rock and getting a little bit of damage. But of course, there's gadgets and additional mining heads that you can change out. But I unfortunately did not get a chance to try it. But I assume that will definitely give you far more options than currently. And I approve. I think it's really good. I quite enjoy how much better prospector mining is this time around. And I know a lot of people have actually said that prospectors have no place in the verse currently, and the mole is really the only one you want to use because moles are also a good solo miner. But the next thing I want to talk about may potentially be a kind of a debuff for solo mole miners, although currently in its implementation it's not 100% working, though maybe CIG will fix it by the time this goes live. We'll see. And that is the inclusion of both ground effects and turbulence within flying near a planet or a moon. And the first one I want to talk about, of course, is ground effects, which is also kind of known as the fountain effect. Essentially what it is that you have thrusters coming at the bottom, and that thruster wash also is creating kind of this random amounts of lift and whatnot from different directions, and it just causes this weird effect as you're coming closer to the ground, as you feel less stable getting closer to the ground. Now, in smaller ships, you don't notice it too much, but in the bigger ships, it is incredibly noticeable. In the footage I recorded, I'm not giving any inputs, and the ship is just moving on its own, and that is the ground effects, and you'll feel that as you come closer to the ground as you move slower. So this is going to make actually landing on planets and atmospheres a little bit more challenging because you're getting these kind of random inputs that are being caused by the thruster backwash hitting your ship. So now as you're coming in for a landing, you're going to have this feel in the stick, and you're going to have to kind of fight it as you're getting closer and closer before you touch down. Now, it's difficult really to kind of show or even describe. It's something that you kind of more or less have to just feel it. Now, we don't have force feedback sticks that are very prevalent. For those of you that use joysticks, this would be something you would probably definitely feel in the stick. But currently, the way it works in the game right now is you just feel like the ship is kind of being arrested away from you. You're feeling it kind of bucking like a bronco in your hand as you're coming down, but it's a very gentle feeling. Sometimes it can really kick up if you're coming in really hard as you're coming down, trying to come in fast, and other times it's very gentle. Like I said, lighter ships, you don't notice it. It's very, very, very gentle on lighter ships, but the bigger ships, you definitely notice it. And why I wanted to bring this up with mining was because of the fact that potentially this is a thing that you will notice if you're solo mining, because you need to sometimes get kind of close to rocks. And if you're in a mole, that thing generates a lot of downward thruster wash, and that starts to cause the ship to start bucking around. And if you're in a solar miner, you could potentially tip that ship if you don't have a pilot. Now, unfortunately, in my testing, and I say unfortunately because I do not like the mole being used solo. I don't think that that should even be a thing. But why I say unfortunately is that when I did my testing with the mole, I noticed that the actual thruster wash was not even affecting my ship as soon as I got out of the pilot seat. So as it stands right now, all you have to do is just get out of the pilot seat and the thruster wash just seems to go away. You don't even notice it. The ship doesn't bobble around or anything like that. So that could be potentially a bug. Hey, this is Hybrid in the editing bay once again, and I'm here right now. I'm going to check to see if they actually fixed it. There was an update that just came out today as I'm recording all this, or I should say editing all of this together. and I wanted to see if they actually fixed it. So you can see the ship is bobbling around after I got out of the pilot seat, so it does look like this definitely is fixed. So now the ground effects does affect the ship when there's no pilot in it. And as you can see, I'm not in the pilot seat and the ship is moving around because the thruster wash is pushing the ship around, which can be dangerous for a solo miner because your ship could potentially tip and start to lose altitude and have a whole slew of problems. Anyway, just wanted to see if they fixed it, and it looks like they did. All right, let's get back to the video. But yeah, I don't like seeing that. I don't like seeing solo mining for the mole because it's not designed for it. I don't like the idea. I know some of you mole owners, I'm a mole owner myself, but some of you out there are probably not liking me saying that, but the reality is it is supposed to be a multi-crew ship and it's not always used as a multi-crew ship. Now, they don't necessarily need to use thruster wash as a balancing mechanic for the mole. Engineering gameplay will probably do that as well too, because if you're trying to solo in the mole and then you're trying to mine and then all of a sudden you have some kind of power distribution issue or something, the thruster gets stuck, some kind of issue, right? You being there by yourself may not necessarily be useful. You may not actually be able to do anything about that in the moment. Maybe the ship will start to tip or something is going to go wrong, and that you need an engineer to address that while you're working, right? So there's other ways they could balance it, but currently, like, this is one issue that they definitely could use. This is one, like, system they could use to kind of balance that as a knock-on side effect for the mole. And of course, it's a change that was not really documented as well. It's just a thing you just notice while playing. And the other effect you'll notice while flying is, while in atmosphere, you'll get a minor amount of turbulence while you're traveling in a straight line. Well, in any direction really, but you'll mostly notice this when traveling in a straight line. If you pay attention to my recordings that I'm going to inevitably edit into here, you'll notice that my nose is bobbling up and down. Once again, these are not my inputs. This is me with my hands off the stick and doing cruise control, and you'll notice that my nose is actually bobbing up and down. Again, this is just some type of turbulence system that they kind of threw in, so it kind of adds a little bit of more realism and momentum to your ships as you're flying through atmosphere and you're cutting through the dense air. It's not really all that bad, at least in my testing. It is noticeable and you do have to correct for it, so it's one of those things that is probably going to be kind of a skill check for pilots going in the future, because if you need to get to your destination in a straight line, you're going to always have to constantly just keep check on that stick. And CAG have already confirmed that in the future they would like to at some point give us trim controls, so that would also be a thing that would probably play as a factor in here as well. But furthermore, beyond that, the issue here is not that big of a deal. If it is a big deal for you, it could be potentially rectified when they do decide to bring in, say, aerodynamic control surfaces. Maybe the reason why it bobbles like this is because it does have thrusters. We're using thrusters that are trying to keep us in place as we're flying in one direction, and you just kind of notice that bobbling. But like I said, it's not really that big of an effect. It's really cool and adds a little bit more immersion, but it's not exactly the most game-breaking issue or anything like that. It's just a little bit more detail, and I actually quite enjoy it. It's really cool, really fun to see. Next, I want to talk about the vehicle handling updates for ground vehicles more specifically. Now, this may seem like not much of a big change, but it actually is quite drastic for ground vehicles. Before, suspension and friction and just the way vehicles handled were pretty darn awful. They were passable, I could say maybe, but they were just not that great. This time around, CAG has gone in and reworked the actual physics behind it, so now vehicles do feel a lot more realistic. For example, the Cyclone is a little bit more slidey, which makes it a lot more fun. You can actually do a lot of oversteer and you can do counter steer with it. It makes it really, really fun. But then you also have a lot more distinction within that Cyclone family. So for example, the Cyclone NT is very, very slow in comparison to, say, a Cyclone TR or just the base Cyclone. And that makes it quite, much more vast distinction there, just within that family alone. But the biggest distinction in that Cyclone lineup is the RC, which feels like a race car no matter which terrain you're on. That thing is just on rails and will not give up. You can go so fast into a circle to the point where you will literally black out your character. That is so crazy the handling is for the RC. It's not very realistic. I see what they're trying to go for with that RC, trying to make it really on rails, super fast with that boost and also being able to take pretty much anything you can throw at it. But it just doesn't look very realistic. It just doesn't feel right. It feels more like a hypercar, like a road car hypercar, than it does like an off-road racing machine. But hey, it works, and again, it does distinguish it from, say, the other Cyclones well enough. Then you have the Ursas, like the Ursa Rover and the Lynx. The Rover feels really great. It's nice and zippy. It also goes over terrain, especially rough terrain, very, very well. It kind of reminds me of the trophy trucks you would see, in a lot of Baja, 3000s or whatever the races they would call them out here in Baja in Southern California and stuff like that. In the terms of that, like you would see those trucks going over really rough terrain, and their suspensions would basically be floating on air. And it's the same thing with the Ursa, right? The suspension is got a lot of really, really well done springs and rebound values tweaked in it, and it feels really, really nice. So that way when you're traveling over rough terrain at high speeds, you're gliding over it. Lynx is a little bit different. It's almost on par, but it does feel like the chassis is a lot heavier than the standard Ursa. So it does tend to flip a lot more for one, and it also tends to bottom out on uneven or rough terrain more often than not. So what ends up happening is with the Lynx, you'll hit rough terrain and the hull, because it's heavier, will end up hitting parts of the ground, and you'll end up bouncing a lot, you'll flip a lot. And overall, in my opinion, the Lynx is just not as fun to drive as it is for the Ursa, at least when you're driving at high speeds. At low speeds, the Ursa is fine. And that probably makes sense anyway, because the Ursa is a luxury vehicle. So if you're doing VIP transit, you're probably not going to be, traveling at Mach stupid on the ground with your VIP in tow. You can save that for the Ursa Rover instead. The other thing that we have, of course, is updates to the Ballista, Centurion, and the Spartan. And those ones generally feel very good, although the physics for Star Citizen when it comes to collisions is still not the greatest. So while those vehicles do feel really good on rough terrain, they do suffer from issues where if you clip any type of small rock or even some light terrain that's jutting out, the vehicle will end up bouncing around like a pinball, and it's very unrealistic, and it's not really fun to drive. So it does make driving in those harsher areas, especially ones that are, crowded around with a lot of rocks, just not that much fun to drive. Then you have the smaller vehicles, like the PTV, which has got a massive speed boost increase. Its suspension is really, really nice. Although for the tires that it has, it doesn't look like it's supposed to do well off-road, but it actually does really, really well off-road. It's really fun to drive off-road. It's super fast, super fun. It is an absolute pocket rocket, but that's in contrast with the STV. The STV got its top speed reduced, and it also feels a lot stiffer in its handling. So the STV used to be kind of the pocket rocket everybody quite enjoyed, and that has been now replaced by the PTV, and the STV is now just like this really slow golf cart kind of thing. And it almost feels like they kind of have the roles reversed. Like the PTV should have the handling and speed and all that of the current STV in the patch, and then the STV should have its handling and all that sent to the PTV. But that is apparently not the case. It's really awkward because the STV in live right now is a really fun vehicle to drive. It's an absolute blast to drive. It's super fast, goes over rough terrain, relatively well enough for what it does with the current physics model. But the PTV, for some reason, has that fun element now, and the STV in the 3.20 patch just doesn't. It's just a slow boat now. It's not really that fun to drive, in my opinion. It can get you to point A to point B, but it's just, you're going to be getting there pretty slow. More interesting change was the ROC variants. So you have the standard ROC and the ROC DS, the dual seater. Now, in the past, people have said, why would I want to use the dual seat ROC? There is just no point. And even if I was going to get a dual seat ROC just because it has more ability to hold mineable materials on it, I would just run it solo. And yes, that is very much true. There's really almost no reason to use the standard rock other than the ROC DS solo. But one thing they did try to change with the vehicle handling to make a distinction between them is that the ROC, the standard ROC, actually handles pretty poorly on rough terrain. It's very, very stiff, and it feels like its wheels just are not well suited to rough terrain. So it can be an absolute nightmare trying to get around properly while you're just putting around on a moon or a planet. And that's in contrast to the ROC DS, which has its 6 wheels, and it is a beast at climbing and going over rough terrain. It is just way more fun to drive. Although don't take it off of any high elevations or whatnot, because those jutting out wheels definitely are just going to cause you trouble as soon as you impact the ground. You're either going to lose the wheels or you're just going to blow up. The other things that were changed, well, I should say things that were not changed, are the bikes. The bikes are relatively the same so far. I've not noticed really too much difference with them. They haven't really touched them. Also, the Nova tank was not touched, as I mentioned earlier in this video. The Nova was also bugged in my testing. It might be fixed by now, maybe possibly by the time you watch this, or by the time it goes live, or sometime later. Either way, CIG had confirmed that the Nova's handling is bugged. So my thoughts on this are they're great. They're phenomenal. Now, most people don't generally use ground vehicles currently, but what they do use them for is, like, for example, Jump Town, maybe Ghost Hollow, maybe occasionally grabbing them to take out and have some fun with your friends. And in those aspects, it does exactly as it was reported to. It's a very better handling system. There's a lot better distinction to it, and it just makes driving a lot more fun. In my testing, there is a really annoying issue currently, though, where if you're driving and you let off the throttle, the vehicle doesn't actually coast. All it wants to do is just apply auto braking. And I checked in the settings to see if there's a way to turn it off, and there actually isn't a way to turn off auto braking, but there is a keybind you can buy that is already actually bound, I should say, and you can actually turn it on and off. But in the testing that I've done, that keybind is not even functional. So driving, while it feels great, the moment you let off the throttle, so for example, if you're doing WASD and you hold down W to go forward and you let go, the vehicle will automatically start applying braking no matter what, and this will cause the wheels to lock up and you lose grip. So even if you're traveling at high speed and you just want to let off the throttle lightly so you can take a turn a little bit better, you're going to end up probably crashing because your vehicle's locked the wheels up, and it's really bad. And I really do hope they can kind of fix that auto braking at some point if they have not already by the time you watch this. But yeah, that's definitely something they need to adjust, because I really would like to travel at high speeds and then coast, so when I'm taking turns letting off the throttle, my vehicle doesn't end up locking up on me. But overall, the changes are great. I think one of the more interesting factors we noted too while testing this was that the wheels of the vehicles are turning a lot faster than they were before, which is a little bit more realistic. It's not perfect by any means. There's, visual issues with it that come with this additional turn radius and turn speed. But the better handling is a much better output as a result. So it's just polish issues at this point. But overall, I'm a big fan of these changes. There were also some changes to just general movement, so there's a lot more freedom and flexibility for player movement now. We have already mantling built into the game, but one of the things they're adding into this patch is mid-ledge grabbing now. So what that means is when you are jumping and let's say your character doesn't quite make the jump all the way, rather than falling to your doom, your character will simply just grab the ledge, which is actually a nice mobility update for players. It's something that you see in a lot of other games, but Star Citizen was lacking it for a long time, but now it is finally in the game. You'll see it a lot in caves. Star Marine maps are getting updated to have this new update, and some vehicles as well, as the Cutlass Black now also has this feature. So one of the interesting things about the Cutlass Black is it has those side doors, and you really couldn't get your way in there. You couldn't even mantle like normal. But now you can actually mantle onto the Cutlass Black. As far as I know, it's the only ship that can do it right now. There might be a couple others. I know that, for example, the Valkyrie can do it, but the Valkyrie always had ledge grabbing from the get-go. So that's not really an issue there. The Cutlass was the major one because a lot of people liked using the side doors, but it sucks that you can get out the side doors but not in the side doors, and now that's a thing. And overall, like I said, it's just an interesting change for mobility. It means, like I said, if you miss a ledge when you're in a cave or something like that, your character will just grab onto the ledge anyway. So like if you don't quite get fully onto that ledge, your character will just reach out, grab the ledge, and pull themselves up. It's quite a quick animation. It's not perfect, definitely needs a little bit more polish, but it's better than nothing, and I actually quite love it. And it works really great in Star Marine too, and it's just fun seeing that extra bit of mobility in the game. This build is also seeing some improvements to RASTAR. RASTAR is the internal tool CIG utilizes to create ground locations procedurally and just kind of tweak them and make them look better. And right now, currently, they're just employing the new update for it around the UGFs, the underground facilities, also known as bunkers. And I think they're mostly just utilizing this as like a training tool to get some of the new hires and whatnot to get used to some of CIG's tools and workflow. So they probably task them to kind of sprucing up the underground facilities. Not really much to write home here. All it really is just an additional kind of bit of clutter, some extra little buildings, and little accoutrements added here and there, just stuff that is just kind of giving more life to the underground facilities rather than just being plopped there. It feels a little bit more lived in. It feels more like this place actually exists within the world. And while it doesn't add anything else beyond that, of course, in the future, we're going to have NPCs patrolling the exteriors of these. We're going to have updated versions of these bunkers. And of course, it also improves the sandboxing of our universe because, of course, a lot of organizations like ours, the Forgotten Heralds, we like to use bunkers as a training location. A lot of the time, we'll tend to do a lot of firefights around the exterior just for fun and to practice. And now that they're adding a lot of these kind of details and really hard cover elements to the exterior, it does mean that PvPing around there just for fun or for whatever is going to be a lot more interesting. So if you're somebody running around doing bunkers and somebody decides to drop in and cause some trouble and you decide to fight them outside, you're going to have a lot more cover, and they're also going to have a lot more cover. And of course, like I said, if you are just playing against some friends or an organization that you're in and you're trying to play against each other, these are definitely going to be a lot more fun to mess around with because the terrain is now broken up with some hard cover that's just fun to run around and mess with. Hey, Hybrid in the editing bay once again, and the reason why I'm going to interject in here is because over the last couple of days as I've been gathering recording, some new patches have come out and there's some new stuff coming in, and I really want to quickly cover it as much as I can before this video goes live. First and foremost, I didn't really talk about this too much, but you'll see on the screen here there's some new UI elements. This is not actually a recent patch thing, this is just something I forgot to talk about in this current run through in the PT, and I just kind of wanted to show that here so you can see that I can see the ladder and ramp axis. We already have this in live, but now it's been just improved. The UI has just been cleaned up and it's a lot more aesthetically pleasing. And of course, also they improved where your ships are, the locations for your ships where they're at in the verse. You know, like for example, when you call a ship or whatever, now you can see the location of which hangar it is, and it's just cleaner, easier to read, and it's just a lot more nicer looking. The other thing too is, of course, we have, you know, you're used to your characters frosting up in cold, frigid environments. They did looks like a visual pass on some of the frozen textures on there. And they're not really anything super crazy to write home about, but it is a lot more detailed than what we had before. The older frozen textures were a little bit more smeared out. I don't know if that was chalked up to a bug or if that just was a earlier texture pass they had done on it. But you can see that there's a lot more granular detail in how your character looks. They have these nice, really cool frozen patterns on them. It still looks roughly the same, and if you've seen what it looks like when your character's frozen, it looks almost identical probably to you if you don't actually pay attention to it. But I notice it, guys. I play this game a lot, so I notice every little detail. And yeah, they have improved the textures on there for when your character gets all frosted up. Still no textures or anything like that on weapons or whatever, but yeah, it's definitely a cool little improvement. I noticed you'll also you see as my character is in here and I'm going to start to defrost, you'll see the actual, you can very much see the difference in detail here. Because before it was almost like the texture would fade out. This time it looks like it fades out in segments now, and you can kind of see like the pattern start to slowly recede. It's very, very nice. Again, we don't see this on certain pieces of equipment, including weapons. Not quite yet. We're supposed to get that at some point. They've showed it in the past, but we still have not seen it yet. So you can see my gun was not frosted up earlier. And now my gun it's just been fine the entire time. Eventually that's supposed to change. So yeah, the other thing that we're expecting to as well is some fixes for combat logging. So if you are used to doing like bounty hunting against other players or whatever, you're probably used to the fact of players just giving up and not even bothering either to fight, or if they're about to get killed by you as a bounty hunter, you always see them just disappear from the world because they would combat log. Well, CIG has put a stopgap for that measure, or I should say it's really just a solid all-around solution, which is now that if you've been in combat, you no longer can just despawn yourself from the world by exiting the game. You will now exist for a short period of time, and you can be killed by both AI and bounty hunters now. Another small quality of life improvement was an additional controls in the game settings to allow you to kind of get some granular control over your social. And what that means is you can control friend requests, you can control party invite notifications, like who you get them from and whatnot. You can control what type of notifications from like comms calls or currency transfers and whatnot, which is really nice for someone like me because I get a lot of friend requests in the game. Guys, I love you all. I love you to death, but I'm sorry, I'm not going to be your friend. It's nothing personal, but I have to keep my friends list open for my org members to easily find them when I'm trying to set up things for us when we do organization stuff. So yeah, it's nice for me to be able to set that to a friends only setup. so that way I don't get inundated with tons of friend requests. Again, nothing personal, guys. It's just I have to keep it clean. The other thing that has been kept clean is the UI HUD for quantum travel, which has been removed. They removed the old HUD, which I think was probably flash-based if I recall, and then they've moved to the building blocks HUD for quantum. It's very simplistic. It just has calibration, spooling, and the cooldown. That's all you really need for now. Of course, Master Modes is going to change all this, so they don't really need to do a whole lot there. They just need to keep it simple, and that's what they've done. They've stripped it back, and they just kept it very simple, which is good because the old Flash system had way too many problems with it. It was never really aligned properly, so people would get confused on how they were supposed to align things. Now you just simply align to the crosshair, and it's relatively simple and straightforward. Also, apparently they did some fixes for quantum linking with people in parties. I did not get a chance to try that myself, but apparently it's far more reliable and easy to use, and it doesn't break as often. So I'm looking forward to trying that when the PTU goes wider to Wave 3, which right now, as I'm recording this right now, we potentially are going to a Wave 3 version of the PTU build. Apparently they've been holding off for a little bit because there's been some issues with bugs like the ASOP terminals not functioning, and they want to make sure that they get it as cleaned up as they possibly can in Wave 1 and 2 before they move it on to a wider Wave 3 build, and of course before we get it in our hands in live at some point as well. And another quality of life improvement they did was made it so the mole pilot can actually use the same scanning features that the mining heads aboard that ship to identify compositions of rocks, instability, all kinds of features. Now, we've had this in the past before. Anybody could scan a rock. They just hit the V as in Victor, key on their keyboard to switch to scanning mode, and then you would aim the crosshair at the rock and hold your mouse button down and start scanning. Now it has just been streamlined, so all you have to do is hit that key again. You may not see your HUD necessarily change when you do that, but when you're in that mode, all you do is you hold left click again. You don't have to aim at the rock, it just has to be at least close to the vicinity in front of your ship, and you'll start to scan, and you'll get a lot of information that the same mining heads can get out of the rock, and the pilot is able to then relay that information to the gunners down below, or if they want, they can have the gunners just sit in the mess hall while the pilot is looking, and then when he sees a rock, he can call them out and have them actually start to man the mining booms. And this feature isn't all just for the mole, it actually extends to most other ships in the game as well too. I was able to utilize this with like an Avenger Titan, for example, in my testing, so that's a cool quality of life feature change. I do enjoy that. And once again, if you're curious how that works, you literally just hit the scanner button on your keyboard. That is V as in Victor, to switch modes. And as long as there's something in front of you to scan, you just hold the mouse button down and your vehicle will automatically scan whatever's in front of you. In this case, it may be like a rock or something like that. And you'll get the information out of that. And then when you're done, you can hit V again to switch out of scanning mode. Again, there's no UI, at least currently when in my testing, there's no UI that kind of tells you you're in the different modes. So it may be a little bit of trial and error trying to figure out what's going on. Hopefully they'll add more to that in a little bit, but chances are this is just kind of like a placeholder they're putting in just as a quality of life improvement for now before they finally get to getting around to improving on this a little bit more. All right, let's go ahead and start wrapping this video up, but before we jump back into my recording of me selling cargo on the Hull C, let's actually go and do a deep dive walkthrough of the Hull C's interior, and let's see what it's all about. All right, let's take a look at this big boy. If you have been watching the video this entire time, I applaud you because there is a lot to cover in this patch, and of course the Hull C has a lot to go through as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at the actual exterior first. You can see those big VTOL thrusters down there. You can see the big retros on the front, and of course that chin turret just underneath the bridge. Chin turret, not exactly a good offensive weapon. I think it's mainly for defense, but not really much you can do with it. You're not exactly going to be dogfighting with this thing, but hey, it's there in case you need it. Again, here's those VTOL thrusters. You can see the big armor panels that come out, and you can switch those back and forth by switching VTOL on and off, and those panels will close when VTOL is actually off. But yeah, it's got that lovely MISC shiny chrome to it. Look at this landing gear. It is massive. You can tell how heavy this ship actually is, despite the fact that I have no cargo. Again, you can only land when you have no cargo on this ship, so these hefty gears really show how heavy it is. Here's also the turret placement for the tractor beams, the vehicle tractor beams. Currently, there's nothing on it. It just acts as a security camera for now until they actually add those in. Let's go ahead and make our way towards the back end. You can see the actual seam here where the spindle will actually separate from the rear section of the ship. So that is the actual hull plating that will roll back, and you can actually see the little ratcheting planks along the side here where the teeth of the gears actually dig in and start to pull that part of the ship apart as it extends backwards. Let's go ahead and work our way further back. Here's the rear landing gear assembly, and then you can of course see the rear engines. Now these are actually one of the bigger weak points of this ship from a defensive perspective. These engines actually are quite easy to destroy with heavy weaponry, so if you have like a Inferno or just any type of heavy ship that can punch through the shields, these engines are some of the first that will actually end up going. And when you lose an engine, you lose a lot of control. Also, just look at the scale of this thing. This thing is massive. This ship is huge from back here. It is one thing to see it, you know, somebody flying it, but let me get in third person so you can see it. Look at the scale compared to my character here. This is huge. Could you imagine seeing this in VR? They are working on VR. Imagine just the absolute scale this would look like to you in VR. This thing just towering above you. It's incredible. Already on a flat display, it already looks huge. Also, take a look at these guys here. See these like red container weird things in the back here? Yeah, that's going to come up again later. I'm not entirely certain what these are. They are definitely dotted around the ship, but we'll come back to that later because there's some interesting things, or at least some theories I have about that. All right, here you have the side engine over here. You can see some of the nice little details, the greeblies they put on the side here, and it looks really, really beautiful. I love the attention to detail. Look at this landing gear though, this assembly. This thing is a big chunker. Look at this thing. Yeah, this thing is heavy despite the fact it has no cargo. Again, you cannot land when you have cargo because the spindle doesn't allow it. So you can definitely see how heavy it is even unladen. Now imagine how heavy this thing is while it is full of cargo. Let's go ahead and work our way around. You can see this is another turret point here. So this is another point for the tractor beam turrets that the engineer would operate. Of course, nothing on it quite yet until we get that in-game. Let's go ahead and make our way to the elevator and let's get inside the actual ship. And you can see that this ship actually has curvatures. It's not like a flat plane. So as you can see, the elevator itself is going to have to utilize a very unique system for getting in because the hull plate is not flat. So it has to have this specialized manufactured hull plate so you can get in and out through the elevator. So let's go ahead and activate this. You can see that armor plate move. Very, very cool design. And then here it goes. Here comes the elevator. Very cool. Now, doesn't seem to have a whole lot of sounds associated with it. The armor plate has sounds, but the elevator itself does not have sounds, at least currently in this build of the P2 that I am playing as. It could be different by the time it goes live. We'll see. But yeah, currently the elevator doesn't really have any sounds. You'll hear the hull plate close though. All right, here we are in the entryway. Now, first thing you'll notice here on the left is the airlock. This is the main ingress point for the ship. You're probably going to be docking more than anything on the ship. So this is going to be the primary way you're going to be getting in and out of the ship for the most part. Especially if you have cargo, this is going to be the only way you can actually get into the ship through a station. Yeah, and it's a pretty cool animation. I love the sound for this. Ah, so chunky. Gotta love it. Also, look at this access panel here. This kind of emergency capacitor access point. Pay attention to these. These are going to come up a little bit later, and this is kind of a theme you're going to be seeing running through the ship, and I'm wondering if this is a new direction that they're going with the design of interiors for ships, and I'll kind of lay out my theory a little bit later. But first, let's go ahead and move on. So we have this entry point, and on the left side, we have actual suit clamps for EVA suits, and we have them for all 4 members of the crew. We have all the way in the back here, we have the captain, and then to the left that we have the navigator, the engineer, and the pilot. So everybody has access to their EVA suits. You can open them up. What's funny is you can actually lock yourself in here. Go ahead and close this now. you can actually put yourself in here, but of course they have a emergency release, so yeah, you can't just lock somebody in there unintentionally and just leave them in there permanently. There's some older ships that have these type of suit clamp systems, and they actually don't have an emergency release inside them, so you could throw someone in there or convince them to go in there and then kick them out of the party and they actually can't get out. It's actually kind of funny. So I do like the fact that they included that. Over here on the right, we have access to the actual gravity generator. Now, the gravity generator, of course, is not modeled in the game yet. It is just all virtualized for now. But we do have the location where the component will go when they finally decide to model that for us in game. Yeah, and I think this is just the gravity plates for just the interior habitation, not the actual grav spindles. Over here we have a weapons locker. So the crew can access weapons. So for example, if they have to land or whatever, they can reach out to their weapons. I'm going to go ahead and place my hardware here for now too, just to show you, yes, this does actually work. And we'll go ahead and store that for later because I don't need it now. I'm just going to be hanging out on my ship. I don't need my weapons. Here we have central access way. Over to the right, we have engineering and the escape pods and habitation, everything that you could possibly need for the crew, all back there. And then up for the front is the brains, which is the bridge section. Over here, interestingly, we have the shield generator, one of two, actually. It's a size 3 shield generator. And we have one up here, and we have one in engineering, so it's kind of an interesting design choice to have these shields away from each other like that. I'm wondering if this shield actually protects the front half of the ship, and then the rear section in the engineering deck actually protects the rear half of the ship. Don't know 100% if that's how it's designed, but it does kind of feel like that's how it's supposed to be designed. Anyway, let's make our way to the bridge here. You can see the layout is similar to the Starfarer. It has a captain's chair as well as a pilot and co-pilot station. Captain's chair is, I mean, it looks like it's pretty much taken directly from the Starfarer. It doesn't look too much different here. You have the pilot station, co-pilot, and navigation and gunnery station all in one, rolled up. And then let's take a look at the actual dash here. Similar to everything you're used to on MISC, it has the similar kind of freelancer / Starfarer design with that mail slot style front window. And then, of course, here we have this access point. See, I mentioned this earlier before, right? This is a theme you're going to see along this ship. There's all these kind of weird, interesting access points kind of dotted throughout the ship. But yeah, so this ship does have some view issues. Of course, it's a cargo ship. It's not a combat vessel, so view is not the most important thing, but it is a thing you'll have to consider when getting the ship. Here we have the captain's station. Not really much you can do with this station. You do get 2 MFDs here, but there is no power management. There's no shield management currently. So it's just a glorified passenger seat. There is just nothing you can do with this station other than just sit here and look pretty. All right, let's look at the co-pilot navigator / gunner station here. And this station also doesn't really have anything else going for it. It is purely just a turret operations station currently. There is no power management. There is no shield management. However, you do get access to the 2 remote turrets on the right side over here. And you can just switch between them using your F key, holding down and interacting with it. You can also use the hotkey to jump in if you keybind that as well. And these turrets are really, really nice. They have a lot of view coverage. They are, of course, obscured when the spindle is extended because you only have the front half and rear half that can actually protect itself. Although there is a bit of criticism I do have for this ship. So you have 2 arcs of cover, right? You have the front side here. So let's say you're engaging threats in the front. That's well and good. But what happens if there's an enemy behind you, right? Okay, let me switch to the turret. Oh, I got to rotate all the way around to find the target that's actually behind me to engage me. And I think this is just a huge design oversight for the ship. So I got targets in front of me, and then I need to engage the rear. I got to spin all the way around to then target that individual who is behind me. Again, I think this is just a design oversight because anybody who would make a ship like this, probably if this ship actually existed in real life, would of course go in and make it so the turret is automatically facing the rear because that is the quadrant it is designed to actually cover, or I should say the half firing arc it is designed to cover. You have the front facing turret designed to cover the front arc and then the rear turret facing the rear arc. Just an oversight probably. Anyway, back here we have our computer blades. Of course, this is just the placeholder model for it. Computer blades are not interactable yet currently in the game, but that is the port where they will be when they eventually are interactable. Have a fire extinguisher. They are working on fire extinguishers, so that port is ready to go when fire extinguishers are in the game. Radar axis. Just the default radar for now because every ship uses the same radar, so we just have that default Chimera Communications radar system there. And that is where the actual full radar system will be when we get bespoke radars for individual ships. All right, back to central access. Let's go ahead and we're going to make our way up to habitation and take a look up here. So let's go ahead and head on up this ladder and let's check out the landing here up above. I'm going to go ahead and go centrally. You see over there we have our living quarters, and to the left of me here we have cargo operations. This is where the engineer hangs out, and living quarters, simple enough, is where the crew go to live. You can also see there is another computer blade station up here, so we can access individual subcomponents for our computer systems and blades here later on when that comes in. Let's check out cargo ops. So this is where the engineer is going to be doing a lot of loading and unloading for the ship when they are docked or at any type of cargo port and they need to load cargo onto the ship. Because the system that you saw earlier in the video where I was loading cargo, and you'll see later on when I'm unloading cargo, is entirely just a placeholder system to allow us to test the gameplay and get the hull C in our hands early. But in the future, this station is going to be where you are primarily going to be loading cargo from. And if I access my remote turrets here, these are not defensive turrets. These are supposed to be tractor beam turrets. Currently, they are just surveillance cameras for now. Eventually, they will be a tractor beam turret, and you will have to manually use this turret to load cargo onto your ship. In the future, you can probably hire some NPCs to do it for you, and of course you can hire other players to do it for you, or you could do it yourself. But either way, you're always going to be loading cargo from these turrets because they are going to be very powerful tractor beams that can move heavy cargo and attach it directly to the cargo spindles on the ship, unlike how it is now currently where it just teleports onto your ship. Because like I said, the current system is just a placeholder to allow us to kind of test the cargo loading mechanics and just get a feel of how the hull C and mass bulk trading is going to actually work out. Like I said, in the future, we'll have to do all this by hand, and loading and unloading is going to be a time-consuming process. One that you potentially could do yourself, but will take you a very long time to do, or you could hire players and NPCs to help you out with that to speed up the process, but of course, that's going to cost you money. Alright, let's go ahead and make our way to the living quarters. Again, this is an industrial ship. It is purely a cargo hauler, so don't expect any frills here. It is really going to be very bare bones and basic. And once again, you can see we have our capacitor processor access point here, right? Just kind of an interesting thing to note. Again, could be potentially for hacking down the line. We don't know. It's interesting that they have it in the game, though. And as we move over here to the left, you can see we have our individual compartments for sleeping quarters, and these are for the crews. And what's cool is these are actually labeled for individual crews, so you can see this one is for the pilot. Over here in the bottom, this is actually the captain. So yeah, the captain does not have an office like they do on the Starfarer. The captain will be bunking with the rest of the crew. So I expect these crews to be pretty tight-knit since we don't have a super big separation of, I guess you could say, leadership there. So we don't have the captain having his office or a first mate or anything like that. It is just simply a four-man crew, and they all work together. All right, we have the mess hall here. Here's the very basic table. Nothing really to write home about. You can sit here and eat your beef chunks with your crew and chat while you guys are in Quantum and just kind of getting a nice place to rest and relax in between cargo jobs. And as we move further back over here, here is the kitchen. Once again, no frills here, no little amenities or anything like that like we've seen in other ships before. So there's not even utensils or condiments or anything like that. It is just simply the appliances and really nothing else. Not even flatware or anything like that. It is very, very bare bones and basic. So you're going to have to fill that up with your own stuff later. Although we do get a microwave. That's always good. It's always nice to have a microwave, right? So further back, though, I want to draw your attention to this window here that says blast door on it. Yeah, so this window is actually closed off with a blast door right here. And this is supposed to actually show the exterior of the ship while it's both extended and retracted, but it is closed now. You can actually see this panel here controls it. It says blast door here, but we can't actually do anything with it right now. The panel does not actually work. And this is supposed to be, of course, the living quarters and recreational space for the crew, but we can't actually see outside because the blast door is permanently closed. At least in this build it is. Let me go ahead and go to the exterior of the ship here and give you a better view of what the crew would be seeing if the window was actually opened here. So let me go ahead and clip the camera through the ship. Here we are. Let me go ahead and zoom out a little bit. There we go. Readjust, and here we go. Through the window, you can see that right now the spindle is, of course, retracted. So you can see that we see all the little gubbins inside the ship here. And this was what the crew would be seeing, of course, if the window was open. But if the spindle was actually extended out, the crew can actually see out into space and see the cargo itself, which is actually really cool, but it's unfortunate that we can't see it here. They may have it closed for performance reasons. I don't know. It's been like this since it's come into the PTU. Maybe they will have it fixed by the time it goes live. I don't know. We don't know. It's just currently how it sits. All right, let's make our way to the bathrooms. You can see another fire extinguisher holding station there. We have a first aid station here for in case you get injured. And of course, we have 4 storage compartments for the crew. I can't check it because I'm in Arena Commander right now. I cannot tell you how much is in here. I believe off the top of my head, it was like 8,000 micro SCU of storage there. And then, of course, as we head to the communal shower here, you can see we have some nice amenities already nicely laid out for us for when we need to clean up. And we do have a sink over here. Of course, ray tracing reflections are not in the game, so the mirror does not work quite yet until we get that into the game. Then we have the actual throne as it extends out there, and then we can store this back away in case you drop a really big torpedo burrito and you need a shower afterwards. You now have access to the shower after you have stored away the toilet. Yep, I mean, it's stuff we've seen already in other ships, and it's taking its design cues from other ships like the Starfarer. Really, again, no frills, nothing too crazy to write home about here. It is, after all, a cargo hauler and really nothing more, and it really does show, but I do love the attention to detail nonetheless. All right, let's go ahead and head back down the ladder here towards central access, because we're going to go now and check out the escape pod room. And you'll see here, the escape pod room here has these double paned glass, right? It's got this kind of really high pressure, double paned kind of glass. Now, of course, it's not actually glass. And you can see it's also over here on the airlock station. It is supposed to be like translucent metal. So it is a very high durability, but you also can still easily see through it. And the reason why it's double pane is because these are going to be exposed to a lot of vacuum and pressure differentials. So of course, having that sectioned off like that is going to be important. Now here we have the actual escape pods themselves for the crew, all 4 of them here. You can pop in, and if the ship is stricken and you need to bail, this is where you're going to be. Now, of course, escape pods don't function in the game yet currently. We do have the tech for it. We have docking now finally in, but CIG has not gone through and added escape pods quite yet. They said they needed docking for it. We have docking. We've had docking for a while, and yet we don't see any escape pod functionality quite yet. So, of course, it is not a priority for them. Again, we have another security access port over here. And again, it makes me speculate. I wonder if this is for hacking or if this really is just a visual detail they threw in. It could be one or the other. We don't know. And in the back of this room, we also have life support. Now, of course, life support modules are not fully modeled in the game yet, so we only just have a virtualized version of it with the actual port available here for when that does become modeled as a fully functional component. All right, let's go ahead and head back towards central access, and then let's make our way through the actual spindle. What's interesting is before we access the spindle, we have to go through an airlock. So this area is potentially depressurized. Now, they said they fixed in some patch notes the idea of people getting or suffocating in the spindle, or at least close to the rear engineering section of it. And as I walk through here, you'll notice the sound is going to probably die out a little bit more, and that's because this area seems to be depressurized. Again, I haven't actually fully tested this in the verse yet. It's possible that this whole area just simply doesn't have any oxygen. So that is the reason why we have an airlock back here, right? Because this area is either depressurized or also it is very fragile, so any type of combat damage could potentially penetrate these very thin layer out here in the exterior, and you don't want it to start depressurizing interior sections. So it's important to have these sectioned off with airlocks. So I do like that little attention to detail by the designers, both of the CIG designers and as if this was, you know, MISC designing the ship and thinking of survivability for the crew in the process by including airlocks on both sections. It's a very, very intelligent design. I quite like that. Now here we are in engineering, and here's the engine access room. You can see the engineering access panels to monitor these stations here. You have both the left and right main engines here. And we still don't really have a lore explanation as to what those beams are, but I can only guess what they are. And here we go, another maintenance access panel. Potentially with the resource management system coming in at some point, we will maybe potentially access these. Don't know quite yet. We do know that resource management is only going to be limited to a very few select ships when that eventually comes in, and then it will eventually worm its way into other ships at some point. You can see also we have a bunch of tubings and wirings all over the place. For a industrial ship, it looks really, really good. I love these big giant tubes of HVAC and all types of emergency valves and stuff like that. And they're all clearly marked. It's a really cool little detail that you have for a ship like this, being that it's of course supposed to be a mixture of human and Xion tech. That's what MISC actually specializes in. And you can see this engineering console back here. This console actually does not function currently. It doesn't do anything, though I imagine in the future we will have the ability to monitor outputs and whatnot from this access point. We also have a fire extinguisher station back here, and of course the side ladder in case we need it if this elevator that we're going to utilize for whatever becomes damaged or inoperable, or if there's just no power on the ship, that ladder will become useful later. All right, let's go ahead and take this ladder up. There's 3 decks in engineering. You can see them right there all labeled. We have component access and airlock. We're going to go straight to the component access first. This is where the engineer is going to be spending a lot of time doing maintenance work and upgrades for the ship. And you can see this landing here. We have our first component access on the left over here. We also have an escape pod on the right. We'll come back to that in a moment. And on the left side, we have our cooler. Big giant cooler. Definitely need it for a ship this massive. You're going to need to keep it cool. And on the right over here, we do have our power plant, which is the beating heart of the ship. Indeed, this whole section is the overall beating heart and circulatory system for the ship, which is why it's nestled all the way inside of engineering. Here's our second cooler, by the way. And then we also have access to our jump drive. What's interesting is the jump drive does not seem like it's the right size for this component housing. I'm wondering if they're going to be doing something with that or if that is final. Very curious. And then, of course, here is our second shield generator. Talked about there's a first one up in the front. Here is the second shield generator. So yeah, wondering if one covers the front and this one covers the rear. And then, of course, we have some really, really beautiful design elements here. I love this spinning gizmo here that is shining light in the area, and it looks beautiful along everything here. It's beautiful in an industrial way, right? Because you can see all the pipings here, all the insulation for the pipings. And like I said, MISC is supposed to be a blend of Xion and human tech. And it just looks really, really cool. I love the attention to detail. It is really nice, and it feels very industrial, despite it being a very techie kind of ship. You can see the coolant lines are clearly marked here. And then, of course, we have over here the escape pod. To the left, before we hit the escape pod, though, we do have our battery access. Of course, batteries are not modeled in the game yet, so we just have the housing as the batteries are just virtualized currently. And then over to the right, we have the escape pod because, of course, the engineer, may be working back here. And if the ship is stricken, the engineer is not going to maybe have the time to run through a damaged spindle, or if the ship is about to detonate, has very little time to get up to those forward escape pods. So MISC has gone through and provided an escape pod for the engineer here, which is a really smart design choice because, again, they may not be able to make their way up to the front area while they're working back here. They may have only a limited amount of time, and having a pod back here will be useful for saving that engineer's life if something goes wrong. All right, let's go ahead and head to the final deck here, which is going to be the airlock station. Now, the reason why there is an airlock up here is actually it's not a primary ingress point. It is an egress point for the engineer because the engineer is going to have to do a lot of work. So look at these details. See, we got even more piping here. And I just love the look of it. Of course, another fire extinguisher station. But yeah, the engineer is going to need to do a lot of work on the exterior. So you'll see we have another suit station here for the engineer. So here's the main airlock here in this space. And then you have the actual area where the engineer would put their second suit. So if there is something going on with the exterior, like something wrong with the engines and they need to stop and do some maintenance or repairs on that engine, the engineer can switch onto their suit, and then they can head outside and start working on the ship. And you can see I have clear view of the whole exterior here. Let's go ahead and go into EVA. And now I can work on any part of the engine here. I can start repairing things. I can also do patchwork on the hull if there's any damage on the hull. So that point there is a very, very good access point for allowing the engineer to start to work on parts that could be damaged or worn out and need to be replaced. Maybe a turret needs to be unjammed. Who knows what could be going on here. But yeah, this is going to be important. Also look at these little access points because there's actually one over here back on the airlock area right here to the left. Now, of course, you can't do anything with it. It's just kind of a little visual thing put in there, but maybe in the future that will be modeled, and this could actually be a sneaky point for people to actually hack their way into the ship, right? Because we've talked about this before in the past. CAG has already confirmed hacking is going to be a thing. They are currently working on it. Maybe that will be a point of ingress for a ne'er-do-well who wants to get aboard the ship and do some nasty stuff to the crew or to its cargo. Of course, you need ways of doing that, and those access points could potentially be one of them, and that is just kind of a placeholder design. All right, let's go ahead and get back to the bridge. I'm going to go ahead and lift this big boy off because I want to show off some stuff on the exterior while the spindle is actually extended, and because there's some interesting exterior details I want to go over here and show it to you. So let's go, and I'll jump us to there. All right, we are extended out. Let's go ahead and EVA because I want to show you guys something very interesting about the exterior here. You'll also notice that they've improved jumping into EVA. Yes, you no longer get thrown around like a rag doll when you jump into EVA. They finally fixed that. Thank goodness. I hated the gummy worming stuff. They finally addressed that. So now you can actually EVA and not worry about getting thrown around all over the place like a marionette. All right. So here we have the spindle. We have the central access way through the spindle. You can see some of it is slightly armored, but it is definitely very, very lightly armored. Hardly anything there protecting it. But also take a look at this. Dotted around the spindle are these red containers. We talked about the one in the rear, right? Look at this guy here. And it's bright red. Look at the one in the rear. Let's take a look at that one again. I'm going to head all the way back here. And I'm wondering if these are potentially like weak points on the ship. Now, in my testing, they don't really do anything. You shoot them both with infantry weapons and with ship weapons, and they don't seem to quite do anything at all. And I'm wondering if that's going to be a thing in the future, because every gamer knows that red means shoot and blow up. So the fact that they have these containers here marked in red tells me something. My monkey brain is telling me I have to either shoot this or this is important to some degree. Now, these spindles themselves can actually be damaged. You can actually lose individual spindles both in combat or through collisions and whatnot. And I'm wondering if those red containers are, say, one way you could detach them easily in combat. So for example, let's say you ran in and you have, I don't know, a pirate ship, and you don't really have the firepower to destroy this thing, but maybe you want some of their cargo anyway. Maybe you could really focus in on one of these weak points and detach it. You could also see here we have the grav plates on here. Now these grav plates, you can't actually walk on any of these. They don't function like any other gravity plane. Despite the fact that they are designed to create artificial gravity, they are simply for locking down cargo and nothing else. So no, you can't stand on it. You can't do anything with them, which is unfortunate. I think that would be a cool thing you could do with it, but CIG decided not to model it that way, so that is not a thing for us. You can also see all the kind of inner workings here of the gravity plates from the rear, and you can also see these ventilation points. You can see these like square ventilation points. I originally thought these were displays and I got excited. I thought this would be like a cool place for someone to come in maybe and disengage the gravity locks on your cargo, right? And then maybe jettison your cargo sneakily, but yeah, unfortunately they're just like ventilation points. Though we do have access points here, just visual access points, but nothing more. But maybe in the future that will be something else. We'll see. But yeah, those red containers don't really seem to do much currently. Like I said in my testing, they didn't really have any effect. Just shooting the spindle itself was enough to detach it. Maybe, like I said, in the future, you could have a way of persuading those spindles to come off a little bit easier by doing a little bit of percussive maintenance with your giant bullets on your ship. We shall see, don't know. Though I do think it is quite interesting that the ship does have these points marked off like that. It does seem like there may be some kind of visual weak points, but of course right now they don't do anything. They're just there visually. And here is the window for the crew quarters. You can see that it is sealed off. And this would be kind of the view that the crew would see. They could see the cargo when it's extended. I showed you earlier what it looks like while it is retracted. Now here it is extended, and this is what the crew would kind of roughly see. They would see the cargo in a little bit of space. So yeah, hopefully they have that as a thing in the future. I would love to have that little viewpoint. But yeah, all in all, the Hull C is a remarkable ship, a feat of engineering for gaming in general. I mean, this has got movable physics grids. It doesn't seem like much because, you know, everything seems to be in working order and everything runs relatively fine, so you don't notice it, but the amount of maths, guys, that goes into making a ship like this is insane. Having a physics grid clamp you down and then also be morphing and extending, that required a lot of tech on their part, a lot of R&D. So yeah, I applaud them for this ship. It doesn't seem like much at first because it's all working, but like if you could understand the absolute Herculean effort to get this working, yeah, I mean, it's hard to explain. I am not by any means a engineer, like a coding engineer or anything like that, so explaining this, I mean, even to me, it's hard to understand, but I do know that it was quite a task to get this thing running, because its ability to shift and morph while maintaining that physics grid is not something to be laughed at. That is quite an accomplishment. So I do applaud the engineers at CIG for figuring that out. And then, of course, everybody else who worked on it, you know, visual and audio and whatnot, putting it all together. It is quite incredible, and it is really cool to see. And I can't wait to see this thing operate in Pyro as well. This thing is going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to definitely be putting this thing through its paces with my org. I really want to test it out and do some combat scenarios and some training scenarios with this thing, because this ship is a lot of fun, both to fly and to actually, you know, take out and utilize in the verse. And then, like I said, the next step is going to be trying to put it through its paces. How is it easily able to defend itself, and how will it be able to be defended by an escort? These are things that I'm very curious about because, like I said, Pyro is around the corner, so you never know. All right, let's go ahead and jump right on back to the actual walkthrough that we were doing. So in the last part of the walkthrough, I was originally buying cargo. Now I'm going to go ahead and sell some cargo. But first, before we do that, let's actually take a look at this spindle opening up and closing. Yeah, as you can see, there's no sounds for the hull movements, but there is sounds when the spindle actually extends out. And yeah, I hope the audio team will eventually get to finalizing the rest of the sounds. The Hull A also does the transforming, and it's really loud in comparison to this one. I do really expect this thing to be really loud when it moves. It doesn't need to, of course, because it's in space, but, you know, with the sound simulation, it'd be nice if this ship was very noisy as it was extending out and also contracting like this, because you see there's no sound. Now, there are sounds in the interior when it's opening and closing. You get some really cool locking in sounds and whatnot, but from the exterior, you don't hear much, which is unfortunate. All right, let's go ahead and get back to the main video. All right, here we are at Bajini Point. Now I'm going to go ahead and take this nice and slow because I am fully laden with cargo here, and this ship will sneak up on you with the amount of weight you can carry on it. You may be tempted to completely unlock your limiter and just fly straight to the station, but if you do that, it takes a long time to slow the ship down simply because of that weight. So my recommendation is just keep it slow as you come in if you are going to be trading with the Hull C, because she is heavy. So yeah, that really covers a lot of what I wanted to talk about in 3.20. There is a ton of stuff coming in this patch, both big and small, and it's always fun to see what they're going to be adding into it. Again, the Hull C and the cargo trading stuff here that you have been seeing is definitely one of the big ticket items that people have been waiting for a very, very long time. Now, it's not going to be the most earth-shattering thing coming into this patch per se, especially if you don't even own the ship to begin with. But that doesn't mean it's any less important. And that reason is because the ship is actually going to be incorporating a lot of technology that is going to be utilized in the future. There's a couple things I want to talk about that all kind of go into that. And for example, like I said, the morphing physics grids was one of the biggest issues they had to work out there. Introduction of vehicle tractor beams, while not in this patch, this is laying the foundation for that, because these boxes on here on these movable physics grids are also going to need vehicle tractor beams in the future to move and utilize. So now we have a vehicle that is going to be the very earliest test bed for that, ready to go, along with that SRV that we're waiting for. So we have a lot of technology that's going to be coming in here, but more importantly, this is also going to be a ship that's going to also be very important for, say, Pyro. Remember, it took me, I think it was about 12 minutes. I did stop halfway through because I wanted to continue talking about some of the stuff. I realized my notes that I had was going to take me longer than the actual travel time, so I had to cut QT halfway through just to continue talking. I didn't want to get distracted after I came out of Quantum. But even so, 12 minutes and at most around 16 minutes to get to Microtech from Crusader. That's a long time. But remember, Pyro is even bigger. It is even more massive. So traveling across the system in a whole sea in Pyro could be almost maybe twice the amount of time. Maybe over 20 minutes or so. We don't know. Anyway, let's go ahead and get this boat docked and get this cargo sold so we can get you out of my hair. Just joking. I love having you guys watch my videos. I really do hope you enjoy this one. It's quite a long one. Yeah, I know it's going to take me a while to put this one together in the editing bay because I recorded a ton of footage of this stuff, and some of it was hard to get. Some of it was relatively simple, but others, there was a lot of bugs and issues. Indeed, just the trading here has been a little bit buggy on and off. Sometimes the whole sea would not spawn properly, or just a whole slew of bugs with the trading stuff, and hopefully by the time this gets out to you all, this stuff will get ironed out and you can try it for yourself, because it is actually pretty fun, and it's cool to always see these different elements of the game eventually evolve further down the line. So yeah, we'll see how that shapes up as I put this into the editing bay later. So we're gonna go ahead and, oh, somebody is targeting. Okay, I see a red. Somebody's targeting me. That is potentially power to shields. That is potentially, I hear an Inferno shooting at me. And okay, he just zoomed past, took a couple swipes at me. Now the station is going to defend me. Not that it really is going to help. I don't have gunners on here, so there's not much I can actually do. I do have chin turrets here. Put them up. I'll shoot you. I got gimbals on here. I'll take you. Did he get blasted? Or no, I must have just lost radar lock with him. I think he just did a strafe and then went about his way. Looks like he did damage to one of my engines. Not a big deal, though. This thing is just too slow for it to really matter. So let's go ahead and just get ourselves docked, since I don't want to waste too much time here and give this guy an opportunity to mow me down. I may be a giant ship with 2 size 3 shields, but I am not by any means invulnerable. This is, after all, a civilian cargo vessel, and that is a military space A10, so that thing will erase me very quickly. So let's go ahead and get ourselves docked and hope the station actually can do its job in defending me, which I have zero faith in their ability to defend me because it's just AI. So we'll just kind of mosey our way in here and see if we can do this quick with a busted thruster here. Okay, we are coming in. The auto sequence has taken over now that we're fully lined up. It was actually a little tricky getting this thing in because of the damaged thruster. It's a little bit weird. I also have an audience. Someone decided to just give me some light at my docking port here for some reason. You might see it swinging out there. Yeah, that cutlass to the right. Kind of watching the show here, as you would say. That guy did not come back and attack us, thankfully. So I'm just going to go ahead and zoom on to the ASOP terminals and store this bad boy so I can go ahead and get the process of selling going. And I'm going to go ahead and cut it again here, and I will be right back once I'm ready to undock and sell. Oh, there's an NPC here, just randomly. Maybe he's a docking color inspector or something like that. Anyway, I will be right back. Okay, let's see. What can we sell it for? There's my helium and max out 1.147 million. That is quite a bit. I think I bought that for 860,000. I think, if I recall, my brain is failing me. So, I mean, it's not the biggest profit, but that's quite a lot of money. Now you can see here, I have to actually go out and transfer my cargo now Even though I have sold it, I have not actually received the money. I have to go now and actually transfer the cargo at the cargo deck. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, we are away. Let's go ahead and take this to the actual cargo deck.
Contacting cargo services, checking for a
Sending you a deck
slot.
assignment.
There we go, a deck assignment. We have about 10 minutes to get there before this thing gets very mad with us. So let's go ahead and make our way there. This is, of course, the most vulnerable aspect the Hull C has. If I am to be loading up cargo or trading off cargo, this is the spot where anybody would want to attack me, of course. Now, the station will try to defend myself, but like I said, if a A10 came and blasted me there, a Inferno decided to just come and blast me, there's not much I can do about it, even if I had gunners. I have to stay stationary to actually unload this cargo. And yeah, anybody could just come in and mess with me, and there's not much I can actually do about it. And the station, like I said, not exactly the greatest when it comes to defending, especially on servers that are very heavily overloaded when it comes to their networking on there. So yeah, this is definitely going to be the spot where a lot of pirates may want to do their business. Though, of course, there's not going to be any way they could really meaningfully tractor beam any of the cargo boxes onto any of their ships, because, of course, you can't use tractor beams anywhere outside of a hangar currently or a pad. So in the future, that will change, of course. That will be a thing, but it's going to be a lot more difficult. It is just basically not... this is the spot where you would maybe go grief like a cargo pilot or something like that. There's really no point. It's the weakest part of the trading because it's the most vulnerable aspect that the pilot is subjected to. But of course, there's no real benefit to harassing a cargo pilot and destroying their stuff because, like I said, you can't actually collect any of their cargo with the current system we have in place. Maybe when they add vehicle tractor beams, maybe we'll finally be able to utilize them in armistice zones. Then this would actually be even more dangerous for the pilots.
Go ahead and get into position to get your cargo transferred.
But yeah, this could potentially be a point of contention for those pilots. We don't know. And it could also be a point of profit for pirates who are a little bit more organized.
Cargo's being transferred.
And who can deal with station security and a lot of high threat scenarios where there's a lot of organization required. All right, we are now transferring the cargo, and once the cargo is fully transferred off my ship, I will be free to go about my business to collect more cargo again if I so desired, and of course I will get paid once this transfer is complete. And that's it, folks. That is it for this run through. I'm just paranoid looking around, making sure nobody's gunning for me here. Not that it matters, of course. Again, it's the PTU, right? I'm just doing this to showcase I have essentially almost unlimited money in this PTU, so it doesn't really matter, but still. But yeah, that will conclude today's PTU run through. There is so much I have to cover. I'm already lamenting having to get this into the editing room because it is going to take me a while to get this stuff in. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, there's not a whole lot coming into this patch, but I mean, hopefully you've seen now that that is not exactly entirely true. There's a lot. It may not be the biggest stuff. It may not be the big and flashy that you potentially want, but there is a lot of stuff coming in when you dig beneath the surface. All right, folks, I do hope you enjoyed this video, especially if you got all the way this far into it. Hopefully you did find this very, very informative and you would like to see more stuff like this down the line. And if you do, and you did find this video enjoyable and informative, please leave a like as it really does help out the channel. And of course, if you want to see more videos like this and much more, subscribe. Until next time, fly safe, and I'll see you all in the black.